With respect to carbon pollution, we are at a disadvantage with respect to China, which has become the world's greatest polluter. It gives financial advantage to Chinese firms that don't have to invest in appropriate environmental safeguards and protections and scrubbers and so forth, versus us. So I gather you would agree that we suffer both an economic and an environmental harm when we allow offshoring based on the fake advantages of one country not meeting up to its environmental responsibilities the way that we do.
In Washington, speeches often fade into the noise of politics. But every now and then, a senator takes the floor and delivers remarks that echo far beyond the chamber walls. That's exactly what Senator Sheldon Whitehouse did when he tackled two issues that strike at the heart of fairness: global trade inequities rooted in environmental negligence, and local healthcare injustice that punishes Rhode Island hospitals. This isn't just another Senate hearing. It's a full-throated demand for accountability from countries that pollute our oceans while undercutting American businesses, from China's unchecked carbon advantage, from trade negotiators who let environmental cheats off the hook, and from a health system that pays Rhode Island hospitals less for the same life-saving work. What follows is a deep dive, an unfiltered extended commentary exploring Whitehouse's remarks, why they matter, and how they tie into bigger struggles about trade, environment, and justice in America today.
Thanks very much. Mr. Switzer, welcome. Dan Sullivan, Senator from Alaska, and I have been working together on ocean plastic waste problems. One of our bills attracted the president's attention, and we went up to the Trump Oval Office for a bill signing, and he was excited enough about it that he called in the press, not just a bill signing, and did a long riff about how important it is to our coasts that all of the ocean plastic waste that's being dumped very often through Asian rivers into the ocean and then it winds up on our shores, that was a problem that we should be solving. Obviously, Dan and I both agree that is a problem that we should be solving. One very useful solution to that would be to put a trade penalty or consequence of some kind on these Asian countries that don't invest adequately in their own waste management systems, which would seem also to be good for American companies that provide waste management equipment and advice and support. So I would ask you to consider that as you're looking at trade policy with Asia. At the moment, they're getting away free. There are no consequences for them from that. It's not even counted in our list of trade concerns, and yet it was enough to aggravate President Trump in this meeting. Would you comment on that?
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciated the time that we spent together during this process, and your comments, I think, are well taken, and I agree completely. I have a very long history of actually working on these very specific issues. I was the Environment, Science, Technology, and Health Minister Counselor in Embassy Beijing from 2015 to 2018. I have visited the settling ponds, for instance, in Inner Mongolia, where they process rare earths. You know, one of the ways that they are able to flood markets with products that are below market value or below the cost of production is because they do not internalize the environmental costs. It's an unrecognized subsidy, in my opinion, and it is a priority of the USTR to begin to implement better environmental safeguards within our trade agreements, the U.S., China, Mexico trade agreement. Yes.
Let me jump to that then, because that's a perfect segue to my second point, which is that with respect to carbon pollution, we are at a disadvantage with respect to China, which has become the world's greatest polluter. It gives financial advantage to Chinese firms that don't have to invest in appropriate environmental safeguards and protections and scrubbers and so forth, versus us. So I gather you would agree that we suffer both an economic and an environmental harm when we allow offshoring based on the fake advantages of one country not meeting up to its environmental responsibilities the way that we do.
Yes, I would agree, Senator. Again, that's why, you know, the USMCA had environmental safeguards built into the trade agreement. Ambassador Greer has said many times, we want to build these similar sort of high-quality environmental safeguards into other trade agreements as we continue to move forward with our discussions about providing more reciprocal trade, environment, labor standards. These are other aspects of reciprocity that we intend to try to build
Senator
into these
Cassidy and Senator Graham have a bill on the Republican side. I've got a matching bill on the Democrat side. We're in conversation constantly about trying to reconcile the two, and we've asked the trade representative, Jameson Greer, to participate in those discussions, and he's promised that he will once this flurry of tariff activity that must have you pretty overburdened over there is through. So I look forward to making good on that pledge. The last thing that I will mention, since we have HHS here, I know, Mr. Stewart, it's not really going to be your problem. You're a general counsel, but I cannot let anybody from HHS come through without once again pointing out how damned infuriating it is to me that hospitals in Connecticut, our neighboring state, I'm from Rhode Island, in case you didn't know, and Massachusetts, the other neighboring state, get paid about 20% more than my hospitals. If a president is visiting Martha's Vineyard and gets hurt, they fly over St. Anne's Hospital in Fall River to the better, higher quality emergency department of Rhode Island Hospital. But if they'd stopped in Fall River, they'd get paid 20 cents on the dollar more. That is indefensible. HHS has never defended it. The organization is just too damned lazy and disinterested to fix this problem, but is very, very, very real in my home state. So it probably isn't general counsel business, but you're here from HHS, and you're going to hear this from me every chance I get to make this case. There is no defense for this discrepancy. We are one regional healthcare market, and we are getting clobbered as a result of a completely unfair payment discrepancy that your organization doesn't even bother to defend. It just maintains it. So excuse my rant, but I hope you can understand how very irritating and unfair this is.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and to talk about those issues. And I can guarantee it 100%. I'll be available to you to talk about that issue, other issues, whenever you want to talk about those things. And I'll take them very seriously.
Appreciate it. Look forward to that conversation. As you know, we talked about the end-of-life program in Rhode Island as well and hope to follow up with that, but my time has expired. I thank the ranking member for his courtesy.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's recent remarks in the Senate chamber might appear at first glance as a patchwork of complaints about ocean plastics, trade inequities, carbon pollution, and hospital payment disparities. But woven together, they reveal a consistent theme: fairness. Whether it's fairness in the rules of global competition, fairness in how environmental costs are carried, or fairness in how American patients and providers are reimbursed, Whitehouse was pointing out the deep structural flaws that allow some actors, be they nations, industries, or government agencies, to game the system while others pay the price. At the heart of his argument on trade and environment is a fundamental reality: pollution does not respect borders. When rivers in Asia are choked with plastic waste, and that waste flows into the ocean, it doesn't just stay in Asian waters. It drifts across the Pacific, washing up on American beaches, contaminating fisheries, and scarring coastlines. Similarly, when Chinese manufacturers operate without the expensive safeguards that American companies are legally required to install, they can produce goods at artificially low costs. Those goods then flood global markets, not because China has discovered some miraculous new efficiency, but because it is exporting pollution as a hidden subsidy. Whitehouse's insistence that this is a form of unfair trade advantage is a critical insight that too often gets buried under discussions of tariffs, quotas, or market access. To understand why this matters, consider how global supply chains work. A factory in China producing steel without modern pollution controls not only harms its local air quality, but also tilts the playing field against American steelmakers who invest millions in compliance. The result is that American firms lose contracts, lay off workers, or close plants, while Chinese firms expand. Consumers may benefit from cheaper goods in the short term, but the hidden cost is carried by the global climate, the health of communities, and the hollowing out of domestic industries. Whitehouse framed this clearly: we are suffering both environmental and economic harm by tolerating these fake advantages. His reference to the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, was significant. That deal, often criticized for being a rebranding of NAFTA, did in fact include some environmental safeguards. But Whitehouse's point is that such protections should not be exceptions, they should be the rule. Every trade deal should ensure that signatories are not rewarded for cutting corners on the environment or labor. In other words, trade should be reciprocal not only in tariffs but in standards. This leads directly to the concept of carbon border adjustments, a policy mechanism that Whitehouse has been championing for years. The idea is simple. If American industries are required to meet strict carbon reduction targets, they should not be undercut by imports from countries that have no such standards. A carbon tariff or adjustment would level the playing field by imposing costs on imported goods proportional to the carbon intensity of their production. In effect, it would export America's environmental standards, forcing other nations to either clean up their industries or pay a penalty at the border. What makes Whitehouse's intervention powerful is that he is not alone. He highlighted collaboration with Republican Senators Cassidy and Graham, proof that this is not a partisan talking point but a matter of national interest. Climate change, after all, is not confined to blue states or red states. Rising seas do not check voter registration before flooding coastal towns. Hurricanes do not target one party's districts. By linking environmental responsibility to trade fairness, Whitehouse is helping to forge one of the few truly bipartisan approaches to climate policy in recent years. But Whitehouse did not stop at international trade. He turned his fire on an issue much closer to home: healthcare reimbursement. Here, the theme of fairness takes on a deeply human dimension. Rhode Island hospitals, he argued, are being systematically shortchanged compared to their neighbors in Massachusetts and Connecticut. For the same procedures, the same emergencies, and the same quality of care, Rhode Island providers are reimbursed roughly 20% less. The unfairness is glaring. In one example, if a president vacationing in Martha's Vineyard were injured, they might bypass a Rhode Island hospital with a high-quality emergency department, not because of inferior care, but because of reimbursement formulas that tilt money toward Massachusetts hospitals. This discrepancy, Whitehouse insisted, has no defensible justification. It is not about efficiency or outcomes. It is about bureaucratic inertia. An HHS system too lazy or uninterested to correct a structural bias that harms smaller states like Rhode Island. The consequences are severe. Hospitals already struggling with tight budgets face even greater strain. They may be forced to cut services, defer investments, or close facilities. Patients, especially in underserved areas, suffer the most. What ties Whitehouse's anger on healthcare to his broader argument on trade and environment is the sense that powerful systems are failing to treat all players equally. Internationally, countries that neglect their environmental responsibilities are rewarded with cheaper production costs and trade advantages. Domestically, hospitals in larger or more politically influential states reap higher reimbursements while Rhode Island is left behind. In both cases, the losers are those who play by the rules, who invest in doing things the right way, and who are then punished for their responsibility. The emotional core of Whitehouse's remarks was unmistakable. His frustration with HHS was not just procedural, it was personal. He represents a small state that is often overlooked in the corridors of power. For Rhode Islanders, the healthcare disparity is not an abstract policy debate. It is a matter of whether their local hospitals can survive, whether they can access care without long drives or delays, and whether their communities are valued equally to wealthier neighbors. In tying these disparate issues together, Whitehouse delivered a broader critique of governance. Too often, policies are set in ways that reward neglect, delay, or exploitation. Countries that ignore pollution get an advantage in trade. Agencies that fail to update formulas entrench inequalities. And leaders who ignore these imbalances perpetuate a system where fairness is sacrificed to expedience. His speech was therefore not only a set of complaints, but a call to recenter fairness as the guiding principle of both domestic and international policy. The challenge, of course, is implementation. Trade negotiations are notoriously complex, with every clause the result of intense lobbying and compromise. Environmental safeguards are often watered down to secure agreement. Healthcare reimbursement formulas are influenced by layers of legacy rules and political bargaining. Yet, if fairness is not demanded, it will never be achieved. Whitehouse's decision to repeatedly raise these issues, even knowing that change is slow, reflects a long-game strategy. Keep the pressure on until neglect becomes politically untenable. For the broader public, Whitehouse's remarks resonate because they cut through technocratic jargon to reveal the lived consequences of policy. Plastic waste in Asia is not just an overseas issue, it is trash on American beaches. Carbon negligence in China is not just about foreign policy, it is about lost American jobs and worsening climate disasters at home. Hospital underpayment in Rhode Island is not just a spreadsheet anomaly. It is about whether someone's loved one can get the care they need close to home. By grounding his critique in real impacts, Whitehouse ensures that his message lands beyond the Senate floor. In an era of polarized soundbites, his approach also demonstrates the potential for coalition building. By working with Republican colleagues on carbon border adjustments, he models how shared national interests can transcend party lines. By pointing out unfair healthcare disparities, he invites other small states, red and blue alike, to see themselves in Rhode Island's struggle. Fairness, after all, is not a partisan value. It is a universal one. The deeper philosophical takeaway from Whitehouse's intervention is this: a system that rewards irresponsibility corrodes trust and undermines democracy. If citizens see that playing by the rules leads only to disadvantages, while corner cutters and polluters prosper, faith in institutions collapses. If smaller states see that their hospitals are consistently shortchanged while larger neighbors thrive, cynicism deepens. To restore trust, systems must not only function efficiently, but visibly treat people and nations fairly. In this sense, Whitehouse's rant was not merely about plastics, trade, or healthcare. It was about the very legitimacy of governance. By demanding fairness, he was articulating a principle that, if taken seriously, could reorient both domestic and foreign policy. Trade would no longer be judged solely by GDP growth, but by whether it uplifts workers and protects the planet. Healthcare would no longer be rationed by outdated formulas, but by equitable access for all communities. And international relations would no longer tolerate free riders who export pollution while importing profits. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse's fiery Senate intervention is a reminder that the fight for fairness is not abstract. It is immediate, practical, and deeply human. Whether it's demanding that foreign competitors bear the true costs of their pollution or that Rhode Island hospitals receive the same reimbursement as their neighbors, his message is consistent. Rules must work for everyone, not just the powerful or the negligent. The struggle is ongoing. But by raising these issues repeatedly, relentlessly, and unapologetically, Whitehouse keeps alive a vision of governance rooted not in favoritism or inertia, but in equity. In an age when cynicism often prevails, that vision is worth listening to and fighting for.